Laurel, can you email the? All right, good afternoon, everyone. Antoine Thompson, Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We are a nonprofit organization that covers DC, North Virginia, Maryland. Now we just expanded to the great city of Baltimore. We want to pray for the folks who are still trapped in the water in Baltimore, and some who don't know the status of everyone, but want to pray for all those, the workers who are out trying to rescue people, those who are recovering in the hospital, et cetera. I definitely want to just pause to recognize those folks. Transportation is at the core of what we do, clean transportation. So I want to say a prayer for those uh, workers and families that have been impacted by that, affected by it. Let me just say that we are a membership organization. We have a lot of great projects and events. We do have a training tomorrow that hopefully we can put in the chat as well for EV planning event that's taking place tomorrow. I believe it's from 11 to, well, 12:30, 1 o'clock. Should be really good on getting ready for EVs. This purpose of this these series, Greater Washington, we have been contracted with by Department of Energy's NREL office, and we're doing these roundtable discussions in person and virtual. And I want to thank Jill Hamilton, who's chair of our board, but also who's president of Sustainable Energy Strategies. And our goal is to work with both public and private fueling station owners and managers to help deploy, increase or accelerate the access to EV charging. I don't know why Logan is popping up, but can someone fix that on our team, please? He's spotlighted. I'm not sure why that's the case. What I wanted to mention were a couple things. One is that the purpose of this is to accelerate EV charging and biodiesel access around the region. Zero emission fuels, low carbon fuels. Biodiesel is heavily used in our medium to heavy duty vehicles. It's also used in a number of our agricultural equipment, warehouse equipment, some of our home appliances, et cetera. And so we'd like to see more biodiesel usage in this region. When you think about California, for example, they have the largest state in our country, and they have has some very progressive and aggressive environmental policies, but they have the highest use of biodiesel in the United States. And so I'd like to be able to see that happening. I would love to see DC, Maryland, Virginia be #1 for usage per capita and raw numbers as well in the state, available at fueling stations, available more places. And the same would be true for the charging infrastructure as well at our fueling stations. We know that I'm really concerned. I'm going to say this everywhere I go. I used to be on the city council years ago in Buffalo, and chair of the environmental committee for first African American to do that. One of my things was always dealing with brownfield and Superfund sites. Spent a lot of years looking at that. And one of the things that was always troubling was what happens to fueling stations when they go out of business and no one purchases it, and they go and become foreclosure, and they go into foreclosure for failing to pay property taxes. Now, a lot of local governments and state county governments don't take those on the tax rolls because they don't want the liability. So we've got to think about how do we shore up our fueling stations? How do we help them transition to cleaner fuels? There's a lot of funding out there for that. I don't think enough people are paying attention to that. And the communities that suffer the most will have from bad transportation, environmental energy policies will be saddled with fueling stations if we don't help you all be successful in terms of as fewer people use gas-powered cars. That's a fact. That's happening right before our eyes. And I sit on a commission in Maryland where they're wrestling with this right now because most of our roads and bridges are funded with transportation dollars. And so if the state is going to struggle with that, it's only a matter of time within the next 24 months that a lot of our mom and pop owned fueling stations will rapidly be faced with that same crisis of how do they stay afloat. And when they can't stay afloat, they may walk away from that business or pivot. We want to help you pivot. And that's what the day of this is, pivot into cleaner fuels, zero emission, low emission. There are all different type of things that fueling stations can do, whether they're publicly owned or privately owned. We got to do something, and we got to do something now. So without further ado, I want to bring Jill Hamilton, who's president of SESI. She's helped over $1 billion in grants to public and private entities, not only in biodiesel, but she's a champion like myself of biodiesel as well. But she's done a lot in this space, and she knows I'm very animated. I'm very passionate about these fueling stations. I'm very concerned that if we don't do something, this is going to be a crisis in the United States of America because we failed to plan. And so people are looking at this project idea, and let's go to work and make some success. So Jill, the floor is yours.
Wanted to hopefully I can share my slides. So I speak better from my slides. You probably find it more entertaining than looking at my face. So hopefully I can, yeah, there we go. Thank you. So hopefully you're seeing my screen, but thank you, Antoine, for having me. And of course, I really appreciate you dedicating some time and energy into promoting, motivating retailers to make a change. I've been in this space for 25, 30 years, and it takes a lot of effort to educate them. And so I really appreciate you making this time available. I'm going to try to touch on unleaded 88, E85, B20, and I've added a couple slides, Antoine, from our last event on electric vehicles, just so that we can have a little bit of discussion about some of the infrastructure funding out there. But most of it's going to be about the HVIP funding, the Higher Blend Infrastructure Incentive Program. I'm going to talk a little bit about why biofuels, the future of low carbon fuels, what is an HVIP grant, and other grants, and then who can apply in the application process. And I will talk about it, like I said, a couple other grants, but I do want to thank Maryland Grain Producers and Clean Fuels Alliance America. I saw Paul Winters on here from Clean Fuels Alliance America. Both of these organizations support us at Sustainable Energy Strategies, but also I know Clean Fuels has been a big supporter of the coalition. So I want to give a shout out and thank you. So why biofuels? Historically, it's been about energy independence from imported oil, but now we're moving, as well as air quality, but now we are talking more about it as a rural and economic development, and we're talking more about carbon reduction emissions, but it's about, I want to stress that point about it being today. Biofuels can impact the legacy vehicles already on the roads today, and we're going to get into that a little bit. So, there's about 275 million registered light-duty vehicles on the road, and only about 1% of those are hybrid and electric. And even though we hear a lot about the growth, and I don't want to minimize our fellow colleagues in the electric vehicle industry, they have an important role to play, but I don't want you all to miss the opportunity to understand what we can do with that legacy equipment today. And of those electric vehicles, about a third, if I understand the data, is dedicated plug-in electric. So I think there's a lot to be had for decarbonizing those existing vehicles today. Not to take anything away from the electric vehicle movement. I know we're all supportive of it and it's coming, but please note that there is much that we need to do. Anyway, as well, there's about 7 million registered passenger diesel vehicles and about 11.4 million heavy duty vehicles on the road. And we call that the kind of the hard to decarbonize or messy middle, whatever you want to call it, on your way to net zero. But if you look at my slides today, I think you'll hopefully walk away with the fact that the biofuels industry is also going to net carbon zero. So don't rule out those liquid biofuels. Here we go. And so what are some of the clean fuels today? I'm going to focus on a little bit on biodiesel, less so on renewable diesel, and fuel ethanol. Basically, biodiesel is a chemical process. Renewable diesel is made very similar to refined diesel, but it's but both of those, biodiesel and renewable diesel, use the same feedstocks. Today in the United States, about 50% is coming from soybean oil, and then other waste veg oils and fats. And then ethanol is made from the fermentation process, predominantly from corn, but we do have some cellulosic ethanol and other things coming into play now as well. And if I can get my slides to move, oops, it would help. Oh, there we go. So and speaking of fuel ethanol, why do retailers want to look at this? Well, to a consumer, you're selling it at about 88 cents per gallon less, or 26%, excuse me, 88 cents less per gallon on average, or 26% overall. That's substantial. Consumers pay attention to that and notice it. And if you look at, we hear a lot about other infrastructure development, but in E85, we grew from over the past 13 years, we've more than doubled the refueling facilities out there. And E15 has only been on the scene for not even 10 years. And we've already seen a substantial growth. We're about half as many E15 stations out there. Okay. I do want to encourage any retailers that are looking at adding this technology to please put it on their sign. We're finding that with E15 in particular, or regular 88, as most folks in the industry like to call it, we're seeing about almost a 50% volume increase if you put it on the sign at the street. So last year alone, we had 400 new stations added, and that's about a 15% increase. And of those, the majority of them were standard pumps, which means whether you're going to fill up with gasoline or E15 or E85, it's right there at the pump, same as everybody, same as all the other pumps. And we're finding that annually that these fuels are saving the consumer about 20 billion annually. That's fairly substantial, and I think that's a motivating factor. So I threw this, oops, I don't think my slides continue to not move, and I apologize. So the map on the left is our footprint, but the one on the right is just an example these are from Prime the Pump growth energy slides, looking at some of the national fleets that have chains that have added these technologies around us. Royal Farms and Sheetz are the predominant ones, although we have a lot of mom and pops as well. So I want you to know you're not alone. And these majors wouldn't be doing this without knowing that there's fuel quality guarantee and reliability. There's quite an extensive use of this without consumer concerns. So one thing we want to point out for E85, what not to do, is we don't want to call it E15, which of course I have several times on this webinar already. We want to call it unleaded 88 or regular 88. We don't want to make it look different. We don't want orange warning labels or extra labels. Fewer than 50% of this. So we want fewer. So what we do not want, fewer than 50% of the dispensers selling E15. What that means is when you build out a station, if you have 8 pumps, we don't want to see 1 or 2 off to the side or even isolated. We want to see them mixed in right there with the other dispensers, preferably at least 50% or more. And we don't want a hose that next to an E85 that the hose next to E85 that's too similar. So let me move to the next slide, and I think you'll see what I mean. So here on the top picture, you're seeing 2 pumps to the left, the E85 and this other one. What we would rather see is 1 dispenser nozzle, and we'll see better results rather than having it be too confusing with multiple pumps. Now here in Maryland, we may be required to do this, and it is what it is. But in Virginia, DC, you don't need to do that. And we're seeing much better results with the ones with the single pump.
Jill, are we able to advocate for that change for Maryland?
Oh,
like
absolutely.
Virginia? Maybe that should be one of the things that we leave this with, is advocating for that policy change.
I would love it. And especially since we have miles of data and limited or no consumer complaints about it. I think the problem has been with Maryland that there is a misfueling concern, but where it isn't in play, we're not seeing misfueling issues.
On his usual tractor trailer schedule, he's usually on that bridge around that time. The bridge collapsed most days.
I'm sorry, Antoine, you were muted and I didn't hear the other gentleman. Sorry.
I was saying if they can mute that person was on another call.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So moving on to biodiesel, Clean Fuels Alliance America's vision is right now we're at about 5% on-road diesel, and we're going to double, the industry expects to double that by 2030. Which is no easy achievement, but they are on track to do that, meaning the industry sees enough feedstocks to achieve that goal. And actually, I think we're looking at 15 billion gallons by the end of 2050, if not more. And some of the new markets that we're seeing for these clean diesels are jet fuel, rail, ocean-going ships, home heating, which we do have in our region, and then we're seeing some new applications for emergency electric generation. Similar to E15 and E85, or regular 88 and E85 flex fuel, fuel quality continues to be something folks are concerned about. The way the biodiesel industry has addressed this is they've come up with their own accreditation or assurance program. They're called BQ 9000, and over 90% of our production are BQ 9000 producers. They work with NREL monitors and does surveys all the time, and we're finding that fuel quality isn't a concern. It's always a concern, but meaning through this kind of voluntary program, we're addressing that within our, if you will, self-governance in the industry. And I want to point out that the shelf life used to be 6 months, and now it's a year with some of the new ASTM standards and specifications that we have. So we've seen a lot of improvement over the 30 years of the biodiesel industry. So one of the biggest reasons to look at carbon biofuels today is carbon. We're all interested in carbon, and with regard to the ethanol industry believes they can achieve net carbon zero by 2050, if not sooner. And some of the technologies they're looking at employing are carbon capture or carbon capture and utilization. And these are ways that they can reduce carbon emissions associated with, if not even more so, take it to a negative impact. And this is the trajectory that they're on. This one is related to, this is off of RFA's website, but I bring it up because I love this graphic. It shows that in the kind of the gold standard for carbon policies is the California low carbon fuel standard, although the whole West Coast, all the way up from BC now down to New Mexico, are implementing low carbon fuel standards. I'd love to see this in our area as well. But 80% of the carbon reductions are done with liquid biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel. Renewable diesel really coming on strong with some of the larger plants that have been going into operation in the last few years. And as you pointed out, Antoine, earlier, just last year, the renewable diesels in California were greater than petroleum diesel, and that was the first time that we've ever seen that, both in the United States or even in the world, to see that kind of impact from legislation like this. So it's very promising. I need to switch this graphic on the left, but the one that I just showed you kind of is better. So ignore that, but I did want to point out that all on-road gasoline has at least 10% ethanol, if not greater. And ethanol now reduces carbon emissions by 46% compared to gasoline. I showed you that graphic a moment ago that the industry believes they will achieve much greater than that, for as much as 70% in the next few years. Biodiesel already is 74 to 85%, but I think the Clean Fuels Alliance America is using the 40%, excuse me, the 70% reduction, and that's hugely substantial. So if we can run some vehicles like we have with DC Water, DPW, and now Prince George's County and others are looking at this technology, we're going to get right off the bat a 70% reduction in carbon, which is much better than our grid today. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking at and advocating for these liquid biofuels. And ethanol reduces 42.7 million metric tons of CO2 a year through, and that's based on about 17 billion gallons of US production. Paul, if Paul's on, maybe he can chime in with what the biodiesel industry is doing, but it's equally substantial. Oh.
Yeah, hi, Jill. In terms of carbon reductions.
Yeah, what's our annual carbon reduction for biomass-based diesel?
So the average is over 70% reduction compared to petroleum.
And do you know what the annual cumulative volume reduction is? How many tons of carbon we're reducing?
No,
no worries if you don't. No worries if you don't. But my point is these biofuels are really having a substantial impact. So what are some of the funding opportunities? I'm going to focus on the Higher Blend Infrastructure Incentive Program for a minute. There's a $450 million available through the Inflation Reduction Act over 5 quarters, or $90 million per quarter. And awards are usually made, the USDA is saying 90 to 180 days, but really we're finding it out within 90 days, if not sooner. You can apply up to 5 million per window, or 15 million total over.
Yes.
So then the matching requirement. So for a small retailer, if you have less than 10 stations or less, you can get up to 75% of those costs covered. But most traditional, like our Sheets or our Royal Farms, are going to be in that dollar for dollar match. And those projects can be last as long as 36 months. Oops. I just bounced off my slide. There we go. So the next window starts April 1st. You can't really apply until this next window is done. And then you have another opportunity starting in July and ends the end of September. So we only have 2 more opportunities. I really encourage you to consider jumping in now and looking at a scope of work if this is of interest. So who can apply? I highlighted the transportation fueling facilities because those are our retailers, or both our fleet and our traditional public refueling. But we also include fuel distributors, and that can include some of our home heating oil distributors, which we do have in this region. A single applicant may have multiple project sites, and most of them I would encourage you to do more than one because it's a little more cost effective when submitting an application. But you need to either have a long-term lease or own the site to apply. So majority of the funding is going to transportation fueling facilities, and this is underrepresented, meaning we're getting more in the fuel distribution facility category. So our terminals, our middle marketers, are more of them are applying than our retailers, and those retailers can be convenience stores, fueling stations, hypermarts, fleets, municipalities, rail, marine, even our ports, delivery vehicles, municipalities, all of them. And there's also a carve out for our home heating oil fuel distributors as well. So what are eligible higher blends? In this particular funding opportunity, it's restricted to ethanol and biodiesel. So anything greater than 5%. For example, Pennsylvania has a 2% mandate. That is not an eligible biodiesel. We have to be greater than 5%. So even 5% isn't enough. We need to be higher than that. But that doesn't mean you have to run it all year long. You can, you just have to have the capability of doing it. But it doesn't, oops, I want to bounce back. It does not include renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel. So this is what a retailer or a fleet could secure in terms of funding. Since we're non-California, our E85 and our biodiesel dispensers are capped at $63,000, and our storage tanks for ethanol is $168,000, and biodiesel is $200,000. But that includes, again, as it says here, can include the pumps, the auxiliary equipment, the lines, gaskets, sealers, etc. But I want to point out that it does not include construction. If it's a new site, you aren't allowed to include the tank because the USDA assumes you're going to have to add a tank anyway. It doesn't include the purchase of the property or administering the grant or a grant writer. Expect to have about 175 of these awards, and although they are competitive, they have been awarding every single grant that's eligible these first few rounds because of the available funding. But once it's gone, it's gone. A lot of folks applying ask, well, what kind of, is it going to be a burdensome reporting requirement? And the answer is no. It's just general accounting principles. It's a reimbursement program, so you have to spend the money first and then get reimbursed. And although you can do it along the way, and it's semi-annual and annual. So this isn't even a quarterly reporting requirement. You do have to do it for 5 years after, because they want to make sure that you're actually using the equipment and keeping it in service. Anybody that does grants knows you need to start now. You need to start with grants.gov, sam.gov. Sign up for sam.gov if you haven't and get a UEI, a unique entity identifier. And then you register for e-authentication, e-auth as we call it, on the USDA website. It's a 2-step process, and then you request an online application. You cannot submit an online application without these steps. And then you have to make sure you have a good definition of your scope of work and a budget. It doesn't mean that you have to have actual bids. You just have to have somebody who's giving you a more or less a good estimate on the costs. And then you have to do some environmental survey. It's a 4-page document. It's not a heavy lift. I think you all can do it. And if not, come see me. I'd be happy to help. You need to also have validation of your cost share. So if it's a dollar for dollar, you have to have in the bank account. Let's say it costs a $10 million project. You're requesting $5 million from the federal government. Then you need to show that you have $5 million accessible and available before you can actually submit your application. And as I mentioned, the environmental survey, you have to have the environmental survey submitted before you're allowed to submit your application. And so I encourage you to take, we think it takes 2 to 3 months to write these applications and plan them out. So for those who haven't been through this process before, you go to the websites here, www.rd.usda.gov/HBIP, and go to the how to apply. Then you actually have another page where you have to click how to apply, and it gives you a variety of information. These are some of the websites that you will need. I'm just putting that in there for references. And then this is an outline of some of the submission activities. There's forms that are generated through the online application that you need to sign. You put your detailed budget in your technical report. There's no additional forms. And then you provide project estimates that's justified in your technical report. And then I mentioned the environmental surveys. And then the online application will generate a score. And they use this score to determine whether or not you're a competitive winner. You also need to include a timeline on when you think you will complete the project and major steps. And then, of course, there's invoicing and reporting. I'm jumping over to the biodiesel tax credit just to throw in that the blender of the B100, so 100% biodiesel, whoever is the blender can get a $1 tax credit. So what does that mean to a retailer? Usually that's being handled at the producer level, but that tax credit, a portion of that $1 tax credit should be passed on to the retailer. So you want to ask about that and understand that. And then of course there's RINs values that are also passed on to the retailer. You're not going to have to do, as a retailer, you don't have to apply for these tax credits or the RINs. That should have already been done upstream. And then I wanted to just throw in here a couple electric vehicle things, and then I will be done, almost done, Antoine. So there's also this IRS alternative fuels tax infrastructure tax credit, and it does include, as it says down here, natural gas, propane, hydrogen, electric, ethanol, and biodiesel blends up to 20%. So 6% of depreciable costs up to $100,000 per item, or 30% of depreciable costs up to $100,000 per item, if the installation meets the Department of Labor prevailing wages. So that's an easy thing to look up on that website. And this, with regard to the alternative fuels tax credit eligibility, you need to look at this. This is a map of our region, and the gray, kind of the orangey grays, the grayed out marks are eligible locations. And then there's a DC AFV conversion and infrastructure tax credit up to $10,000 per public refueling AFV facility, includes EVs and biodiesel. And there's a link in there as well. And then Dominion Energy has an EV charging rebate program up to 50% of a level 2 charger. And then, of course, there's a NEVI bus rebates and clean ports programs. Most utilities have it on their websites, but if not, certainly reach out to Antoine and he can provide more information on that. And then I just included my contact information. And that is it. So I will stop sharing.
Right.
I know that was a lot in a very short period of time.
Yes, yes. So we're going to go over to our next Catherine Magruder, head of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, who will talk about some of the EV incentives and fueling stations, et cetera, in the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Antoine. And I also want to echo your concern and thoughts for those impacted by the Key Bridge disaster today. This will clearly be a significant economic hit for them. And just the traffic alone is tough to fathom. And, our thoughts and prayers seem insignificant, but that's what we have. So with that said, I'm happy to be here and pleased that you invited me. Jill, you're a tough act to follow. You're so thorough. The Maryland Clean Energy Center is a not-for-profit instrumentality of the state of Maryland. If you could go to the next slide, Laurel. We are a quasi-governmental entity that serves as a statewide green bank. We do focus on our mission to create jobs and drive the commercialization of climate-related technology and adaptation of clean energy products and services to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we'll talk a little bit about more about that in a bit. So the way that we do that is fourfold. One, facilitating access to capital with our financing programs using leveraged or direct investment. We provide specialized procurement and technical support to facilitate project implementation. We support climate tech commercialization with new technologies moving their way to market from research and development. And we offer outreach and educational program events to stimulate markets and enable climate justice. If you go to the next slide, As a green bank, just a little bit of a slide about what green banks do. Green banks use a little bit of public money to crowd in private capital for targeted investment and outcomes that are environmental in nature. We can invest in underserved communities, assist consumers and business owners without the profit motive characteristic of traditional capital providers. We can marry our capital with private lenders to make the use of funds more advantageous for the consumer at the other end of the project. We can help mitigate risk to pull private capital in with more advantageous terms for borrowers like station owners. And we act as a bridge between government, industry, utility, and academia to facilitate partnerships. Let's go to the next slide. So MCEC, just by way of introduction, we have several consumer programs that I wanted to introduce you to. We do a program for residential property owners called Clean Energy Advantage, which is funded in part by Empower ratepayer surcharge dollars to buy down the interest and guarantee lending. We've done about 1.5 million in indirect lending since March of 2022 in this program. This is done in partnership with the Montgomery County Green Bank and 7 utilities in the state of Maryland. So if you're looking at ways to improve your home and reduce your energy costs, that's a program you want to think about. We also are the program administrator for the MD PACE, or Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Lending programs, in 17 of the state's jurisdictions that collect property tax. And this is an advantageous financing structure that allows the loan to be tied to a voluntary lien on the property, and the owner is only assessed for the payment on the loan with the property tax. And the lenders like this construct because essentially the property acts as the collateral for the cost of the improvements. And this is a construct that could potentially be used for improving properties, small businesses, industrial, manufacturing, agricultural, not-for-profit buildings. We also operate the Maryland Clean Energy Capital funding and financing structure. This is using MCEC's ability to issue taxable and tax-exempt bonds for project financing, which could be used in a collective construct for more than one property. We've been working in that space mostly with municipal and institutional facilities operators and owners. Let's go to the next slide. We just launched this year the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund, or the C3 Fund for short. This is using a $5 million investment each year for the next 3 years of state funding that will be used to leverage public money crowding in private capital. We will be doing that through revolving loan fund, equity investments, grants, all with an eye on assisting 40% of low to moderate income households and communities in the state of Maryland. There is currently a solicitation out for investment partnerships that we will be entertaining for this first round of funding to be released in late June. So if you have an idea for a project that you'd like to see some investment funds dedicated toward, or a investment construct that would serve to achieve some of the outcomes that are desired by the stakeholders on the call, now is the time to look into that, and you can find information on our website. If you go to the next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our approach for our financing and funding investments and our strategies. If you look at the graph that you see here across the top, we've identified the types of technology strategies that we know will achieve greenhouse gas emissions in keeping with the state's climate reduction goals. And Maryland has one of the more aggressive strategies and goals in the country. So we're looking at energy generation, transmission, and cost reduction resilience on buildings. We're looking at buildings and their efficiency, their energy performance. Maryland has adopted building energy performance standards. Any structure, commercial structure that is above 30,000 square feet, 35,000 square feet will need to comply with the new Building Energy Performance, or BEPS regs that the state has adopted by 2025. So this would be demand management for energy, HVAC, electrification, weatherization measures, and there will be some technical assistance available through the state to help building owners strategize and implement their improvement measures. As you can see in the third column, we're focused on transportation. This may mean zero emission vehicles, infrastructure to help for charging. We're looking at hydrogen fuels, sustainable aviation fuels, biofuels. It fits probably more in the ag and forestry column, where the feedstock is coming from either that source, or in the following column where we're looking at waste. And I think Jill mentioned that biofuels can be created with from a waste to value food chain of using waste cooking oils. So that's another benefit of adopting biofuels, is that we're reducing the waste stream and the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with it. And then we also have a cross-cutting category where we're looking to invest in workforce training, on-the-job experience, capacity building, outreach, education, planning and assessment for projects, and climate reduction community goals.
Kathy, can I ask you about this? This is Jill.
Yes.
On that, some of my clients and some of course, Clean Fuels Alliance America's members are interested in that sustainable aviation fuel, but they're not small business. Would they fit under that distributor category? And are there only loans, or can they get grants as well?
The answer to your question is yes, they would probably fit under the distributors category. And we don't have in MCEC's budget tremendous capital for grants. The grants tend to come through the Maryland Energy Administration. I'm not aware of a grant program that MEA is currently offering for biofuels. They would be eligible for federal grants, and we're happy to partner on that. I'm going to talk a little bit, as you did, about our ability to provide services in grant writing and grant management. So that is something where we could take a good look at a collective ask and a partnership grant. So down the side, as Jill was pointing out, the audiences that we're addressing: consumers, typically homeowners, individual homeowners that are, on the ground level at your kitchen table. What are you doing? What do you need? Small business and commercial property owners, facilities owners, helping them. What kind of, looking to match the resource to the need here, right? Industrial manufacturing, producers and distributors, municipal and institutional clients, not-for-profits, and then entrepreneurs. So we're looking at where the matches come together. What programs, resources can we deploy to help achieve the greenhouse gas reduction that's aligned with deploying these technologies for these consumer audiences? Let's go to the next slide. So MCEC has been a proactive lead and participant in grant applications in the past several years. Since fiscal year 2021, we've submitted funding requests for approximately $452 million in applications and received over $252 million in awards. Our most recent award that I think relates to the topic at hand today is a $15 million Department of Transportation Federal Highway Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant. This will fund the installation of 58 EV charging stations in Maryland communities, and with 2 specifically at gas stations. We have a grant kickoff meeting on April 2nd, so we're getting ready to dive in with deploying the funds. This particular grant is a multi-round grant. We submitted application for over 88 stations, including some that are corridor located, and this would be stations that are within a mile of the major arteries. We were only funded for those that are in communities, which are beyond that mile parameter. We will go back in for another funding round, and what MCEC is doing is acting as the convener to pull together the interests of private partners, public partners, vehicle charging infrastructure, firms and planning companies, owners, operators, sort of pulling everybody into the pool to say, all right, what do we want to do? What do you bring to the table? The 58 stations that were all funded in part with a match from the charging companies. So we are very proud of this work. And everything we are doing in the space is trying to align with the state of Maryland's NEVI program, where they are deploying charging infrastructure. So it's sort of all hands on deck. Let's go to the next slide.
So how much are those grants to those gas stations? Are they relatively small, or are they loans as well? Because you said you don't
Those
do
are,
many
it
grants.
is grant funding that will actually do, so the gas station owners, operators have a contract with an installer that is pending the grant funding to put in a station. And these are either level 2 or level 3 charging capability.
Wonderful.
Um,
Now, is it too late for them to apply for that? I know some were pre-identified.
in this particular grant, all were pre-identified. It's not too late to register interest in the next round that we will be submitting for. And we've learned a lot from this experience, but MCEC will continue to develop these partnership grant applications. And if there is a stakeholder that is interested in participating, they should reach out and let us know. Jill mentioned the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program at USDA. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, Jill, because you covered it really well. But I do want to say that this is an example of where MCEC, as a neutral third party, could be a convening entity to pull together a number of station operators who would be interested in collectively adding infrastructure or improving their infrastructure. And what MCEC would bring to the table is the grant writing capability, grant management capability, and rather than everybody having to go out and individually get a sam.gov account and manage all of the reporting, the efficiency of having someone assigned to do that for a collective group of station owners is a role that the Green Bank can play in partnership with the Greater Washington Regional Clean Cities Coalition. So something to think about in the future. I know, Jill, you and I have discussed this, and it may be that it makes sense to do that for that last round in July.
Yep, and we're hoping that these types of educational opportunities will bring that to light, especially with the rural community. I know you and I have spoken about whether or not if they don't have if they can't meet that financial commitment letter that I mentioned in the grant, whether or not we could partner with you to get a low interest loan for them to do that.
Right, and we would be interested in developing that type of program. And I think the more we can show a critical mass of interested stakeholders, the more motivated the state would be to make the commitment to throw energy at solving for that. So we'll certainly continue to work with you and Antoine in finding that critical mass.
We deeply appreciate that, Kathy, and we're going to continue those dialogues.
Let's go to the next slide. Thank you, Laurel. So I just pulled this up. This was the USDA website, I'm sorry, US Department of Energy website showing everything about alternative fuels. And what was interesting here was across the board: biodiesel, electric vehicles, ethanol, hydrogen, natural gas, propane, renewable diesel, some of the things that Jill mentioned. But this particular website is a very good resource if you want to learn more about where stations are located. There is a US map, so as you're traveling, you can find them. I think the range anxiety that people express is starting to be less and less of an issue with these easily accessible map tools. But there's also, on the right-hand side of the slide, as you can see, information about the tax credits and the laws and incentives that are out there on a state-by-state basis. And this is a great website as a resource for you. Let's go to the next slide, Pearl. So the tax credits that are available now may qualify for up to $7,500 for qualified new vehicles and up to $4,000 for qualified pre-owned vehicles. Eligibility for the clean vehicle tax credit is based on some requirements. So research is a good idea, and talking to dealers is a good place to do some research. I did want to provide a link to the clean vehicle tax credit checklist for you and the used clean vehicle tax credit checklist. And if you go to the next slide. So Antoine asked me to focus a little bit on Maryland specific incentives. And it's a little bit of a challenge right now because we're in flux. This is a slide provided by the Maryland Energy Administration, thanks to Eric Kaufman. And he's focusing on the announcement that Governor Moore made several weeks ago to dedicate $90 million in new funding for climate programs in fiscal 25, pending approval of the General Assembly and the budget, with an emphasis on multifamily accessible charging. So this would be in apartment complexes or areas where condominiums where it's not just single homes. Let's go to the next slide. The medium duty and heavy duty zero emission vehicle grant program is currently funded for up to 75% of the incremental costs of zero emission vehicles. These are typically battery electric and fuel cell driven vehicles, and local governments are eligible for the program. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that MEA had several incentives on its website. And these, of course, are going to be largely dependent on the budgeted resources to cover the investment. So on their website, although these are active programs, some are out of money already. And their note on their website now is funding for this fiscal year's vehicle excise tax credit is no longer available, but they will continue to accept applications and place eligible applicants on a wait list, but funds are not guaranteed. So you can reach out to them, but through that program, you may be eligible for a one-time excise tax credit up to $3,000 when you purchase electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And that is something that's an additional cost that we need to think about. And that could be also at a business location. So we want to keep our eye on how that program is funded in the future. They also have an electric vehicle supply equipment rebate program. Let's go to the next slide. And this is their sort of the breakdown of how that program has worked. They've had $2.5 million, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they have had a wait list for several years. So they're constantly filling the backlog. And there have been funding limits, and the percentage of cost changes. So all I can say is it really is important to just touch base with MEA if you're looking to purchase equipment to see what you would be eligible for, and how their incentives when their incentives will be available. They do have grants and loans. We mentioned earlier the medium duty and heavy duty zero emission vehicle program. They also have the Smart Energy Communities program, which allows local governments funding for sustainable long-term clean energy policies and projects. And among those can be fleet conversion or EV charging infrastructure. And they do have also their Open Energy Grant program. And I think that's one where we could put our collective heads together and come up with a creative application to address the broader need for biofuel infrastructure implementation. And I have the contact information for the transportation.mea@maryland.gov. Amanda Hinn is the acting transportation program manager, according to their website. So if you go to the next slide, I do want to mention the Maryland Clean Energy Summit will be held in October this year. We're focusing on carbon reduction from idea to implementation. And we will be hosting a roundtable on clean transportation that Antoine has kindly agreed to moderate. And we look forward to having participation at that conference. If anyone's interested in more information, it is available on our website. And that, I think, is it for me. You can reach me, if you look at the next slide, via our info@mdcleanenergy.org or via the phone number there. They will route your call to me, and I appreciate the opportunity to have talked with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to give folks a chance to ask some questions. I know we have two dynamic women leading this conversation today. Really thank you all for being here. I want to just get right into it. We're going to go over a few minutes, but that's okay. I want to ask you all about this funding. Some of these kind of smaller organizations, how do they get started in trying to apply for this money for, they got their small mom and pop own, or they may own 3 or 4 gas stations. How do they get started in applying for this money? What recommendation would you all give to them? I know there's a number of folks on here that are thinking about it.
I'm happy to jump in, and then Kathy, you can certainly add to it. It sounds like we both can offer support in that regard. Usually, the ethanol and biodiesel infrastructure, usually we find folks that can cover our time to help write those grants. But Kathy, it sounds like you all can also offer support for that. Certainly, Antoine, through GWRCCC, if there's some of the more innovative applications or grants where we can do some collective efforts that Kathy was talking about, I'm sure we can collaborate there as well.
Right, Jill. So MCEC does keep a grant writer on staff. This is available for a fee for service, very reasonable fee. And we maintain the SAM.gov and ASAP.gov status. So we can act as a fiscal agent, as the instrumentality for you, where we are eligible to apply on your behalf, or we can help you write the application. Amy Gillespie is an expert in federal grants and knows all the tricks of the trade. And so you can enter into, and there are, yes, you can enter into a work order, task order agreement with us where you say, I want this done. I want to do these 3 stations. I want to put this type of infrastructure in, whether it's biofuel, EV charging, or a combination of both. And, this is my budget and this is where I want to find money. And we will help you navigate the funding sources and help you fill out the application with the right justifications. And then it's just a time and task order. If you get funded, we can also help receive the money and award the money, and we can help you with procurement of vendors. As a neutral third party, we can run request solicitations for you. We do currently have a riderable procurement for EV infrastructure and planning that for large jurisdictions that may be useful. We can also refer you to EV infrastructure experts who can help you develop a budget and a strategy and the engineering for installations at your sites. Once you have that budget and that strategy, then I think you're in a really good position to go after federal funding because you have a plan and you have a credible vendor, and that's what they want to see. So if our sort of inventory of partners that are out there is helpful, we can be a resource.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to give anyone that's an attendee that's got a project that they're thinking about, that's got a project they're thinking about in DC, Maryland, or Virginia with a fueling station. If you have any questions, just jump on, unmute yourself and jump right in. If you got a fueling station you're thinking about or 2, or you got a potential client that you're thinking about, if you if you need any advice, we got two experts here that can answer your question. If they don't have the answer, we'll get the answer because we have a team that pretty much has an answer for almost everything. Not everything, but close to it. Any questions? Michael Kennedy.
Hi, Antoine. Met you the other night at your Baltimore event. That was wonderful. Jill, I have a quick question for you and then a question for the panel writ large. We're Larry Davis and I were in the original Trade Point Atlantic Empowerment Academy. And so we've been groomed to deal with these kinds of issues. We don't work for them, but we have some preferences in terms of doing these kind of things. So Jill, Trade Point Atlantic has huge warehouses, Amazon, FedEx, million square foot warehouses. And I'm wondering if you've seen any initiative from those people, or if it would be worth our trying to do that at Trade Point Atlantic. Right now, there's no EV charging or fueling stations at Trade Point Atlantic. And it's a 5,000 or 5 square mile project with millions of square feet already of these large trucking companies, basically.
Specifically, I think I may even defer to Kathy and Antoine on this one, but I know we're trying to engage with them. And we are open to any connections you may have with them to help us bridge that conversation. But I am going to defer to Antoine and Kathy if they were more specific projects.
So it's a great question, Michael. And as a matter of fact, we are looking at the dray truck operation and electrifying the port vehicles as a way to reduce emissions across the board, and working with a couple of the operators there who are interested in being the demonstration, the guinea pig case, right? But the challenge with these, certainly with electric vehicle charging stations, is somebody has to own and operate and maintain and be responsible for paying the bill for the power, and having a successful partner who has experience and willingness to take that economic risk is important. And so it's not as easy as just, let's put something in the ground. Trade Point may want to have those individual chargers at the level 2 capacity for customers and visitors that are parking in their office space, but the larger scale charging for level 3 fast charging and for the trucks and the dray trucks is a whole other discussion. So having the right operator at Trade Point, if it's not going to be Trade Point themselves owning and operating, or in partnership with Trade Point, is really the crux of the matter. I can't really talk to the biofuel. I think I would defer back to Jill on that. But that is an amazing facility and an amazing location where biofuel production or biofuel, I just don't even know how that would work there. But we are working with some representatives of Trade Point, some representatives of private partners, and of dray truck operating companies to look at how that might work in the port.
Okay.
I would add that
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
there
Michael.
is I just found actually a $3 billion allocation in the IRA for port electrification.
So I did want to comment on that. There is a DIP. It stands for or PI. It's Port Initiative, Port Infrastructure. I can't remember this list. I'll look it up and put it in the chat. But I am aware of some towing, a tug company or a towing company that's interested in doing a hybrid technology. They're not necessarily they don't fit some of the NEVI type programs because they're not a dedicated vehicle, if you will. They're not a zero emission vehicle, they're a hybrid. But that's a nice place where it actually bridges the biofuels and the electric space. And so I'd love to have more conversations with you or Kathy on that
Yeah.
particular project, and we'll be happy to explore that.
Cool.
But it's great project in Baltimore, but we do need, the tug company is willing to take on a lot of the burden. But that equipment costs 30 to 40 million dollars. So it's definitely something that needs grant funding to make it happen.
So just for
Right.
just sake of time, because we got a few more folks that want to chime in. I
Sure.
want to
Thank
give
you. Thank you very much.
no problem. We're going to have some couple meetings around ports. There is a funding opportunity on the street right now. So we'll have some folks come talk to us about that opportunity across the region. I wanted to give a few other folks who've actually worked on some more projects like this or thinking about another project like this where you've actually deployed some charging or at some fueling stations or deploy biodiesel at some fueling stations. See, Alphonse, you want to state your
Yeah.
name and organization?
Hi, nice to meet everyone. Thanks for taking some time to put this together. This is kind of exactly what our space needs to, really kind of educate fueling customers on the importance of adding these technologies. I'm Alphonse Neppi. I am the Vice President of Business Development for Ready Charge. So we work actually almost exclusively with gas station retailers across the country. We work with probably 2 of the top 5 convenience store chains in the country. So we focus on, those travel corridors, NEVI, and kind of, all things electrifying convenience stores. And, we found, utilizing the tools through the IRA and NEVI funding, 30C that you guys had mentioned, that there's a lot of tools, in the chest that we can, find good ways to actually, make the ROI worthwhile for a lot of the fueling stations. We actually own and operate a lot of the sites ourselves, and we will sell that same turnkey solution to fueling retailers. So yeah, I wanted to just introduce myself and kind of let you guys know what we're doing, and thank you. And we will be participating in NEVI in Maryland coming up here. I think it's due in probably 2 weeks. So we got some great partners on the fuel space side that we're working with to add EV charging in the right places. So we can economically deploy charging across the corridors at the right price. We're using different battery technologies so we don't spike grid demand, different things like that. So we can just really roll out these technologies where they're easy to use, convenient and seamless and cost effective, right? And especially for the consumer. So yeah, any help we could get, from you guys' team with NEVI, just talking on strategy, or if you guys have anything you would like implemented into our RFPs, or any help that anything we can do together, happy to do so and talk and go from there. So yeah, thank you.
Alfonso, thanks for being here today. Are you
Yeah.
a member of GWRCCC or Maryland Clean Cities?
Well, I just spoke to Antoine about that recently. So yeah, we will be joining. And we look forward
The
to.
reason I mention that is oftentimes GWRCCC has opportunities to, whether or not they get a grant and they want infrastructure development projects such as the ones you're describing, and we need those are going to be pitched out to our members. So we really want you to be involved, but it's, we kind of, I don't want to say restrict, but we are going to try to promote it first to our members.
Yeah, makes sense. No, yeah, we'd love to be a part of that and help. And it's kind of, what we do. So
We definitely need your help.
yeah, we definitely have experience working with convenience stores, and we've done it for a long time. And everything I just kind of mentioned are reasons why we're able to get the projects done, and it's great. So especially being an EV driver myself, I know how important it is to be able to go to somewhere. It's like the first exit off the highway, not having to necessarily maybe go to like a Walmart in the winter and walk 100 yards into the Walmart to get a water or whatever it might be. So it's definitely important, because I think convenience stores have been set up for this business model for however long, hundreds of years, to service vehicles. So it makes a lot of sense.
So we're gonna take one more question. I know we went over a few minutes. I see we still have a few folks on. Anyone else have any questions for our panel before we wrap up? I'll give them some closing comments, but any other questions for our panel? All right, going once, twice. If you have any questions, you're shy, you're bashful, and yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat, my email, and if our speakers can do the same, feel free to reach out. We will have 4 more of these, 3 more of these before June. So feel free to reach out to us. So I think we started with Jill. We're gonna start with Kathy for 1 minute closing comments, and Jill, the same.
Thanks again, Antoine. I just a couple thoughts, having listened. I would really be interested to know from the stakeholders who are station owners, what keeps you from moving forward? You know, if we could get some type of collective analysis of what the barriers to success are that we might be able to collectively address. And then also, it's clear that there aren't open incentives for station owners to make an investment, and maybe that's something that we need to look at as a region, as a policy or a collective investment. So MCEC is happy to be at the table. We are happy to partner with you and the stakeholder audience that's out there. And it may just take 4 or 5 leaders to put their heads together and come up with an initiative. And I'm happy to dedicate resources to that if we can be helpful.
Well, we definitely want you to do that. The Department of Energy is really looking forward to us providing them with some recommendations, legislative funding, project specific, or whatever it may be. I think Jill came up with an idea earlier today on a regulatory change at the Maryland level. I think that hopefully coming out of this, we can have something that we can share at the federal, state, and local level as well. Jill, you want to have final comments?
Yeah, this has just been really helpful, Antoine. I hope we've been able to reach some retailers that have an interest. Don't let funding, lack of funding scare you off from doing some of these innovative technologies. That's really all I want to say. Come talk to Kathy and myself, and Antoine will help you find a pathway forward.
All right. Well, I want to thank the group for being on. I know we went over a couple extra minutes, but I want to thank you all. We will have another roundtable next month. I think next month we're going to be with the Director of Energy and Environment from District of Columbia. And we'll be moving these conversations either in person or virtual for the next couple of months. And so thank you all. Everyone have a great holiday weekend. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
You too. Take care. Thanks.